I'm Daniel Montgomery. I am the writer and artistic director of JFI Productions, also a performer. I'm an actor by trade, and now I'm a little bit of a writer too.
Kristin Childers. I am a creative producer and production manager with JFI. I have been producing in this town and in New York for over a decade, and so grateful and thankful that my career has brought me here to this place with these people.
I'm JT Swierczek. I'm the executive producer and founder with Justin, and my background has always been in building businesses, but for other people. So it's a nice touch to be able to play my part to help build stuff for us.
Hi, my name is Stephanie Turek. I am the choreographer, creative producer, and costume designer. I also run social media, and I do pretty much anything that I'm asked, and I love it.
And I'm Justin Fix, and I'm the founder, co-creator, and kind of the visionary to kind of keep us all paving this work forward and moving this work forward. And, here and with so many others before us, we are JFI Productions. CreepLA was JFI's first out the gate in 2015. It started all of this for us, really. It was our take on a haunted house, and we wanted to sort of redefine that. And so it was a very multi-sensory experience where guests were sort of pushed through different spaces, very traditional like haunted houses, but instead you got to spend much more time in these rooms and really get to, I think, be a part of the fear rather than just normally, getting a jump scare and getting pushed into the next room. We were really making you come face to face and encounter some of these kind of interesting and dark character types in our worlds.
Yeah, I think of CreepLA as a sort of modern twist on a typical haunted house experience. You're touched. It's heavy on story. It's heavy on mood. It's dark. It's sexy, and it's the beginnings of what we always kind of call future theater, except we're just trying to scare you while we do it.
I was a disgruntled actor in Los Angeles, and I had been working in hospitality, I had been working in sales, I had been acting on the side, I was spending all my Halloweens with Daniel, and ultimately was why the hell not, right? We might as well do something, right? You continue to talk about the things that you want for yourself, and I finally was well, let's just do it. Let's just max out a couple credit cards and do this damn thing. And so I think the idea came to us in June or July. JT and I also decided to run away and get engaged for 2 weeks in the middle of it, and was hey, so you guys are gonna kind of build this haunted house, and when we come back, we'll cast some actors, and then couldn't find any actors, so we found ourselves on Craigslist. And before you know, I would really honestly say we built the show in 3 or 4 weeks. It was guerrilla and it was raw, but that's how I knew haunted houses to be, growing up in the Midwest. It was, trash bags and duct tape and, no chainsaws. And originally the idea with the name Creep really, I think, gave the direction and the vision of what we wanted to do, right? The idea of the creeps or the creepy things that you could come across, but then also you being the person who's just simply passing through dark spaces and creeping in environments and creeping around to discover stories. And we used that as a launch pad. And I think coming out of season 1, I don't even really know what we thought we did create. But it was it was something, and it was nuts, and it was wild, and it was fast, and we ran for 18 nights, and I feel we pushed through. Poor Stephanie was at the door on it. Daniel and I were in the show playing different characters every single night for whatever actor didn't show up to work that night. So I feel CreepLA was a pilot, and it was also a bucket list for us. But then I think we also knew that we had found something, and when we kept on coming back year after year for a haunt season in LA, we always wanted to kind of redefine, retailor, refinesse, and do it all just much better year after year. And I think that's why we were so lucky to get to season 5 with CreepLA.
I just remember it was Justin has been one of my best friends for years and years and years, and it just started with a text. You just texted me, and I think it was July of that year, and said, I'm gonna do a haunted house. Let's do this. And I just immediately said, oh yeah. I don't know what that means, but yeah, like I'll happily do it. So we had a couple meetings, threw together some ideas and some words, not many, and we had a friend that had a warehouse, and all of a sudden it was happening. And before we knew it, a lot of people showed up, a lot more than I think we thought would show up, and it became a thing. It really was just for fun, for sure. And then it sort of became this train that wouldn't stop screaming, basically.
And I don't think we even really knew. I mean, honestly, we didn't really know what we were doing.
No.
Oh no!
Honestly,
No.
like no idea.
Yeah, we were literally like,
No clue.
I think we started with like the themes and the tones, and then we moved to like how we were gonna map the thing out a little bit for like the $30,000 budget we had a credit line of to build it with, And I think from there, like, we just kept on like going to Goodwills and sourcing costumes, and then we had like a cast of 15, 16 maybe?
More than that.
Yeah?
Yeah, it was more than that, because we ended up having to pull a bunch of like scare actors.
Yeah.
Remember, it was like 30?
I think our first casting call was literally calling freaks and like circus folk. Like I feel like that's what we did,
And
and
we
it's
pretty much cast anybody that showed up.
yeah.
Almost.
Had like a weird, interesting look.
Seriously.
Could do some weird stuff. Like they're in.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah. Yeah.
And we were figuring it out as we went. And I remember Justin and we were in the show every night, and a group would come through, and we would try stuff together with the guests, and then the group would pass through, and we were like, okay, come back together. What worked? What didn't work? I'm gonna try this time. You're gonna chew up this piece of paper and spit it out. I'm gonna jump at them from behind. And we would do that between every group, trying to just figure out what would be scary, what would work. We, it was so guerrilla. It was so fun.
But we learned a lot because we were able to like workshop a lot. And I think for us, like being on like the side as like a performer or like a scare actor, like that instant gratification of knowing like, it worked, right? Because that scare or that laugh, whatever, you can really feel that impulse, that reaction comes from a guest. You're like, oh, it's working. Like people were terrified. And we were just having a hell of a time doing it, everyone has done a haunted house, and there's other companies who are doing haunted houses really successfully and like big scale and big. And I think because of where we came in for year one, all we really wanted to do is put people in really sort of uncomfortable situations. And to me, simply putting yourself in front of a stranger is ultimately that. The scariest movies for me like are always the real people, right? Like The Strangers was like one of the scariest movies I saw. Session 9 was one of the scariest movies I had ever seen, and it was all about shining a light on people who were just not themselves. So just shining a light on that a little bit more and allowing people to come face to face with a stranger. I mean, I think the one like thing I had Googled coming to Daniel, I was like, there was like a thing I had Googled that the average person, if you make eye contact with a stranger and you look at them for longer than 3 seconds, it like evokes like a feeling or it becomes uncomfortable. And I was like, wow, what a concept to be able to be walking down the street to a complete stranger, and if you were to lock eyes with a stranger and look at them for just 3 seconds, it was said to give people the creeps. And I was like, oh, we're gonna spend a lot of time looking at people.
There's gonna be some eye contact.
Yeah. We're gonna be sitting people down and having people get real uncomfortable. And ultimately, like that was kind of the start there for me.
Yeah, the irony was I do not like scary things. I don't particularly agree with them. Not agree, but I just don't like them. That's just how it is. But having Justin here and loving them, there was always that dynamic. But something that I'm terrified of is, like he mentioned, the strangers, things that can actually happen to you, human beings to other human beings. And I could always handle haunted houses because I knew there was going to be a mask or a chainsaw and they're going to jump out. But when you elicit real fear from real things that can happen from human beings, I think it's a whole different feeling inside, and I think that's what kind of started the process.
So that psychology of fear, right? That it lingers with you in a way that it's a different kind of adrenaline rush, I think, And I wasn't there at the onset, but I'm also not afraid to like go to the darker parts of the human psyche, and so I really just think there's something to that. Like, you walk away from our shows and it lingers and it lasts, and it really does kind of like give you this like titillating, like looking over your shoulder feeling that I don't think a traditional haunted house model does. Yeah.
And to Chris's point too, like, it just felt real.
Yeah.
Like real fear. Like, it just like, yeah, like it's not, there was nothing fake about it. Like, I don't think year one, I don't think we really did like any makeup. Like, we had a gas mask on one person, but like ultimately it was just like real people telling real like ghost stories. And I think that was a really basic and simple thing built around just like a really cheap, like, but kind of well thought out like little mini maze. And I think it resonated because I feel like the impact and impressions from a performer side like outweighed that of like maybe a thrown together like trash bag maze.
CreepLA, we wanted to pull from a bunch of different sort of sources that creeped us out, literally. And the experience started with two teenage girls in a bedroom, real horror movie cheese on purpose, of talking about Slender Man and these urban legends, and you end up playing Bloody Mary with these two girls in this actual sort of two-way mirror kind of bathroom moment where I was hiding in a granny dress and a weird mask, and we actually had a Bloody Mary that popped out. And we love sort of the different elements of horror that we could sort of pull together. And one was we wanted to set like a dark, funny, sort of twisted tone right from the beginning to let you know like we're here to play, and this is going to be wild and weird and you won't know what to expect. And as you go through the experience, it is a sort of a maze of mirrors and darkness and weird ring around the rosy, you know, scary kind of clown figure in the dark. And as you go through it, you end up in this tunnel, so you had to crawl, and as you came out of that tunnel, you were split up. And two people would go with one actor, two with another, and they'd get their sort of individual moment with 3 or 4 different creeps, that we call them, real people without masks on, and have your first real like separate experience from everybody else in your group. And that was one of the things that we ended up sort of using and still use to this day, of splitting groups up, you know, to make it makes it even more uncomfortable, it makes it more personal. And we picked out different sort of versions of a creep. A guy that seems very nice and put together but is here to eat you, literally. There's a guy that likes to hurt himself, and we had a guy that would like you know, like stab into his palm, and a girl that was obsessed with being your best friend. And depending on who pulled you, depending on what story you got, and then you'd end up in a maze, a long hallway filled with bodies, basically, while wearing the same mask. And we love that sort of mishmash of crazy, weird elements that were playful, dark, intimate, personal, and ends up leaving you with, you know, what did I just go through? Like, what did I just experience? And that sort of element of surprise and excitement was something that tickled us so deeply. And, you know, we love people coming to the shows more than once. And it really was kind of different every time. Maybe you'd get a different character as you came out of that tunnel. Or maybe you'd see something different within the experience itself.
Year one was really fun too, because I feel like it was such a simple thing that we ran with. Like, what's underneath the mask is far like scary, and it was a simple way of us to like unify that, because everyone was so human. But at the end of all these like sort of monologue moments, everyone would put on the same unifying mask. And so at the end of the show, you're walking down this corridor of like all the same sort of type of these masks, but then blending it in with like real jump scares and actors. And so it was like that unifying note of like, oh,
everybody puts on a mask.
Everyone is hiding.
Mask.
Yeah, everyone.
There's a lot of symbolism there for sure. I think there was some strategy there when it comes to the Bloody Mary scene. We knew in order to infiltrate this space, and perhaps, you know, there's some shows that may have done that, but it fairly new at the time, that we had to introduce the audiences quickly to what this type of art was. And so that scene in particular, we had to start quickly so people got an idea of very fast what they were in for. Oh, they can actually talk directly to me. So there was a lot of play there and strategy there in order to incorporate both our audience members with our actors and set the tone of the rest of the show.
Funny story too about Bloody Mary. Bloody Mary, like the idea originally between the two-way mirror was like Bloody Mary was gonna like appear, like, you know, you're gonna call her, she's just gonna show up in this two-way mirror, and like it was just like falling flat like every single time. And we also like rented, like, of course, like new company, I was like, guys, got this most amazing mask. It was like this $200 mask, and I was like, oh my god, we gotta use it. And everyone just like hated it. Like they were like, no, this is awful, Justin. And before we knew it, like we were cutting a hole in the ceiling in Bloody Mary. We decided like this act, we needed to hire a girl, so we found this long hair. So we found this woman off of Craigslist that we were like looking for actress with long hair, and sure enough we got this like 53-year-old woman who had like hair down to her butt. And we're like, your job is you just gotta drop in from the ceiling.
You gotta hang
upside down. But we found out a really cool way, because the two-way mirror became a storytelling device where we use these cue cards of like, so you were like looking in the mirror, cueing you to like do the action, so that when Bloody Mary, of course, and the light would go off, so then when the light came on and we had this strobe moment, all of a sudden the two-way mirror now was not reflective, and you saw that there was a woman in room with you
above you,
and it just worked. Like it was such a good scare. Like so people lost their minds, and it was a real good moment for us.
Yeah, that year I feel like it was so like quintessential haunted house, but we still found ways to make it artistic. Like we actually cast our first dancer in year one, and we cast some bone breakers, which those are the dancers that can do all like the weird, I can't do it, but they like move their bones and like they're like kind of disjointed and weird, and like Justin's always been such a champion just for performance art in general, so it's like when we can incorporate dance in it, it's like, yeah, let's do it. And we somehow made it creepy, and like the guests were all in a box, and they were like peeking out of these little holes while this dancer was, and the lighting was coming at them, and like it was so eerie.
His dancer was in a gas mask.
Yeah, and it was just so weird, and suddenly like something that really is just so normal looked so weird. And it was all so cool because you could only see it from like a little hole. And we like explored those like different vantage points and how it can be interesting and change a scene, and that was fun for me.
It was, yeah.
We, for the first year, we knew we wanted the guests to be touched. And, you know, we'd never explored that really before. And we kind of figured it out as we went. They had to sign a waiver, yeah?
Yep.
Yeah. We also, our very first year, had a safety word. Remember that? Mm-hmm. The safety word was choke. And if a guest felt like things were too much, they would say the word choke, and then one of us would escort them out of the experience. That being said, there wasn't a lot of like extreme touching. There wasn't. It was more so that you just could be touched. Shoulders, arms, you know, being guided that particular way. There was nothing aggressive about the touch at all. And, you know, we were learning that was even a possibility for theater. So we were kind of just figuring out as we went. There wasn't, because there was nothing necessarily extreme, the touching was mainly just to be able to guide guests with arms. And really not much more than that.
And we knew if we were going to continue on for multiple seasons, we had to start gaining trust of our audience. So it was really important for us to train the actors, train ourselves in many ways. To Daniel's point, that guiding is really the most key point there. Because just eliciting touch is going to freak people out anyway. So by doing it gentle and doing it smart and making sure that you're always in control and the guests feel safe was of utmost importance. And it started gaining that trust from our audience. So the next year they knew what to expect. They were less scared to be touched and more interested in the story. But we had to gain some trust for sure.
And I would say year one too, maybe as a creative team, we didn't set much rules like on our guests, right? Like you're not allowed to talk, right? Like I feel like year one was a very challenging year because it was like so traditional haunted house that you just had people just screaming, yelling back. And through those sort of transitions, I feel, from these like more narrative or story building scenes into these worlds that we were just trying to make everything work. Like, why does it make sense to like be meeting with a little girl who's playing with a cockroach and like telling you about her invisible friend and then running into a mirror? Well, before you knew it and before we had really even thought about that much, we were like, well, Invisible Man, you're going into a room full of mirrors. All the transitions to us started to like flush themselves out, and I think that was what we then had taken from year one and have now learned from in all of our seasons about those transition beats. How can you introduce people to storylines and characters and have those people just disappear while you get lost in a completely different world? So year one was a really great way of us kind of figuring out how do we go from a bone breaker to a doll room to a clown playing Ring Around the Rosie to then Hannibal. Like it all like was like, how do we do that? And by focusing, I think, on those transition beats, we were able to kind of put out some magic.
Yeah, the photo booth is an extremely important part of the Creep brand, and we started it in year one just to elicit some marketing and to see if people would get engaged with it.
I almost say, too, like the photo booth was almost like people, I felt sometimes, like year after year, people just came to get the photo.
Oh, yeah.
It was like really funny.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's expected.
Because it's so sexy.
It is. It really
And
just
CreepLA is sexy.
It is sexy.
Yeah.
We had no money. We were doing this on our own thing, so our marketing budget was really, really, really small. So how can we, at the time, we had actually used to throw Christmas parties at this house, or at this apartment, and we used to hire a company called Snap Yourself, and we noticed just how quickly people gravitated towards a photo booth, and we instantly thought that, well, that's mostly free marketing now, because now our social media is coming on, and we're going to get these to post. So we figured out every opportunity that we could work with somebody and utilize it, and we're just lucky that people jumped on board. And quite frankly, the company that does it has a great camera, because the photos end up looking really, really good, and I think that certainly helps because people then want to share it and post it. But that's how it started.
In 2015, Instagram wasn't even really a thing.
Yeah.
And so I feel like it was like the white. What's the takeaway? What's that memorable moment? And we really did, I think, treat year one as a true, like, after your experience, capture your photo with the clown, or who's the other guy from Goosebumps who was in the photo booth?
It was kind of an adventure.
Yeah,
There was
yeah,
dummy
that's right,
masks.
that's right.
Sometimes he would wear a different mask depending on the night. Honestly, there was like kind of a maniacal slappy.
But iconic, black and white.
Yes, we knew we wanted to be black and white.
Yeah, and the messaging was so simple. And I think once people just saw these like kind of gorgeous black and white photos that just said creep, right? It was just the intrigue. It was that question of what is creep, which then I think just started it, like before we knew it, like tickets were selling out, and like poor Stephanie at the door, like we would sell nights, at one ticket time. There wasn't even like a timed entry. So like we didn't even really know how to like build a proper like throughput and input of this thing. And before we knew it, Stephanie's,
Yeah, the lines down the street, and we just didn't really like figure out maybe the logistics of it. And I love it how you call year one the pilot season, because I feel like we literally learned everything.
Yep.
It was just like crash course CreepLA. And we learned about ticketing, we learned about how we don't like lines, we learned
Guest management.
management.
Storytelling.
Yeah, like literally costuming,
Costumes.
scenic. Like we were on like a budget,
Yep.
and we just made stuff work. And honestly, it was a lot of like our background in hospitality. Like I basically was just calming people down in an angry line, like hundreds of people a night, and just telling them, by the end of it, I promise you're gonna love it. You're gonna be so scared. If you don't like it, come back and find me, and we'll talk.
You'll have a gorgeous picture.
Yeah,
You'll post
and
it.
literally-
You'll
yeah.
love it.
Literally, no one came back unhappy.
So 2016, we came together as a team like around March, and we started looking for a space. I knew I wanted to kind of come back bigger and better, and people had already kind of been like asking about us, right? Like I think that was the first year with Scare LA. Like we were like, wow, there's an itch to scratch. There's like people who are asking about us, and so we didn't end up finding a space until about August. But the space was really big. We got
really big.
We really scored. We really scored. It was over in Glassell Park, and we had like a huge one warehouse, and then we had another like 7,000 square foot warehouse. And along that way, We had gotten some people who had like introduced us to some other players. We had this one gentleman who joined our team that year, David Anderson, had joined us. A great actress named Fiona Renee had joined us. And so it was kind of again pulling together a group of people and saying here's what we gotta go forward. But at the end of 2015, we said, what was our weaknesses? What were our hits of 2015? And I think 2016 was simply how do we do it better? And 2016 was for us a big year to prove for ourselves because it was our sophomore year. Did we just get lucky in 2015? We got to kind of come out the gate. And so we did. We learned from 2015 and we thought about all the throughput, the storyline, and that's kind of how Entry was built.
And it was a pivotal time for us to learn quickly, and I think, in my opinion, it differentiates us in many ways, as it was our first time to listen to our guests. And to their point where it wasn't just what did we think we could do better and what could we improve? We have a motto here that we're good, better, best. We're always wanting to continuously improve. But in that particular show, we listened to our audience of what, the line was a big deal. So if you remember in Entry, we incorporated the lounge experience where we had actors inside the lounge. We did have a full bar. People would hang out there for a while. But what they didn't know on a back-end logistics is they were actually standing in line. And so that was our way to not manipulate the system, but to make sure people didn't feel like they were waiting, make sure they were given something while they were waiting. And that's just an example in that is how we're just continuously trying to improve based on guest feedback and guest experience. At the end of the day, to her point, we're a hospitality company first. So we always want to treat our guests as guests. And so we want to keep them happy and take their advice. And it's really proven nice because we've seen comments on I noticed that this was an area that we commented on and they listened and they improved. And each year we do that. So it's, again, gaining trust with our audience, I think.
Entry, we also double downed, right? Everything we did come back bigger and better. It was probably the biggest cast we've had to date.
Yeah.
Big cast. The show was twice as long as the first year.
Yeah, about 60 minutes all in.
I think it was 90, 75.
Yep.
75 minutes, including the lounge. Yeah, and I think the first year we sort of said, oh, what is a creep? And then the second year, I think our sort of starting off point was, who is a creep? And so we started pulling from inspiration of this sort of tortured artist figure who had disappeared in the 70s and left this strange cassette tape of his, or recording of his last live performance piece. And the idea was there are these fans of this artist who has disappeared who want to sort of honor his work. And, the idea is if you listen to this tape, you get pulled into his mind, basically. And we just wanted it to be bigger, better, badder, longer. And it was wild. So for CreepLA that year, in anticipation of Entry, we designed a really, really big box that there were little peepholes on each side of the box, and guests could sort of walk around the box and see really strange, interesting, beautiful scenes. We had Yannicka, one of our actresses, wearing a shirt that I had designed, looking at herself in a mirror. I was in one of the boxes, shoving my face up against the hole and licking it and grunting and being crazy. We had
5 or 6 performers doing strange things to sort of promote this idea of art, basically, to sort of tease the theme that this year is going to be focused around an artist. And it was crazy. It was a big old box that was very ambitious, and it was amazing. It worked so well, and it was definitely very different from your typical short walk-through experience to promote at this big horror convention. Instead, it was offering the guests the chance to take a peek, and look through, talking about vantage points, how we always want to have different perspectives with whatever it is that we do. It really made you feel like a creep, yourself, as you were sort of peeking on these weird scenes. Art for us is a big theme in a lot of our work, especially, that was the starting off point for Entry, and it's a theme that's kind of run throughout many of our shows. And I think it's because, in a way, that's what we see what it is that we're doing. We see it as theater, we see it as art, and art comes out of your brain. And we love to pull from what is real. We don't usually like to skew supernatural. So when you're pulling from,
this dark character's inspiration, his art, our sort of dark inspiration, you're able to get away with a lot of fantastical, beautiful, interesting, shocking, twisted things that have come out of, a mind. So in a way, you're still staying grounded in reality because you're just experiencing the creation of this sort of dark figure's art. It is an excuse for us to get wild and weird, and theater is performance art, so it is sort of a level of meta there that we're incorporating, and we probably will continue to incorporate. We love the beautiful, we love the strange, we love the outlandish, and that's art.
Yeah, I would say like entry was cool. I think some people just loved the lounge far more than just the experience. They had 45 minutes, and I think for us, like, before we were even really thinking of ourselves as like a theater troupe or like an immersive, like, right? Like, we were kind of just coming back another year, and I think the lounge was, again, another thing for us to realize, like, oh, that's another layer of something that we hadn't really experienced. I think we had a really strong opening in entry. We placed like groups of 8 down these seats and covered them with these gorgeous veils, and then when you listen to this dark tape that just morphed and got nasty, we had like all these like Edison bulbs that were like casting these great shadows, and then these women ripped off, these nun figures would like rip off all your veils, and then before you know it, they were like ripping off their hair, and there was like these 2 bald women. It was pretty cool.
We had a couch filled with sand.
Yeah, we had a couch. Yeah, we had this couch full of sand.
And I guess that is shove their hand into the sand.
And then before you know it, you pull out the sand, and then you push and turn around a corner, and then you come into this room that has like this huge pile. We called him like the Sandman. There's really another really strong moment I think was like kind of this red room where you got thrown into this like really kind of sexual tension, like padded, like kind of room, and then before you knew it, you were again separated.
Yeah.
So there was like these entrance points into these like 3 or 4 different stories, and so again you went in a group at 8. Before you know it, only 2 of you went there, a one-on-one here, so you again had that one-on-one personal attention, and then we kind of shot you out, kind of similar to year 1, in this kind of like maze, this really nasty, wild, dark maze.
I was gonna say it was our first year of switching fear a little bit into the uncomfortable, and I think part of that uncomfortable was sexual stuff. I think that it was kind of a stretch, but it really paid off, and I think my favorite scene was we really amplified dance a lot and choreography a lot. And Steph was actually in the lounge, and she would pull people into a box, but she would separate couples, and she was obviously very beautiful while she was dancing, and you could see the uncomfortableness happen with both men and women, which is another form of fear. They immediately had anxiety, immediately didn't know how to react, and forcing them to slowly come out like that, I think was a really eye-opening experience for us, because then it allowed us to think on the next show, let's play with a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and yes, let's incorporate dance. Let's make this beautiful. Let's make this as interesting as possible. And I certainly, because I was in the lounge a lot, and I would just watch people slowly just become more and more uncomfortable before they even got in the show, and it was a really cool thing to watch.
Entry, we were able to find a lot of like our key players who have been like pillars in our company too. It was like a year 1 for a lot of like new faces, but people who have like really stuck with us. So it's been cool. I mean, like Misha Reeves, she's done every one of our shows,
Misha's
but like
been there since day 1.
Yeah, we had like Yannicka was an introduction, Mason Conrad was an introduction, like some really good pillars. Deirdre. Deirdre. Yeah.
Deirdre's a force of nature.
Yeah, she was great.
Lore came to us like a gift to us again. We were already planning and prepping to build our own creep show, which was going to be all about the who, what, where. So we were going to focus on like where creeps come from. So that's what we really wanted to focus on. So it's kind of ironic and iconic that like all of a sudden like where ghost stories came from, right? Folklore. We ended up getting there, but with just a kind of a different lens or a different approach to the work. 2017 was a hard year for us though. We focused and did Willows for the first sort of run all the way up until August. And then we went right into the lore season. But all summer we had been trying to find a space. You know, the Ghost Ship fire had just happened up in Northern California, and we could not find a space. And of course, then my father has to die the same year. So it was like really crazy, but come July, we got approached by Amazon. They said that we have this IP, we're really focused in like sort of transmedia. We want, you know, it's as a podcast, they're gonna make it a series. We want people to now to be able to experience the world in a real time. So we kind of, it was our first bat at working with like a partner, like a big company like Amazon, and looking to us as a theater company to kind of produce this world for them. And that's how Lore came to us.
And it actually started with them wanting us to come in to pitch the idea for their premiere party. And we kind of shifted that and thought, well, what if we stretch a premiere party? Because premiere parties are great, but if you're not there, you miss it, right? And so you're just really relying on other people's photos. So we thought, what if we made a premiere party for your show, but stretched it out over 6 weeks and made people actually experience the show? And we went into the offices and pitched that to them and set this tone and set the scene. And we're luckily, I think we're lucky that they jumped on board and believed in it.
Lore, I feel in our eyes, because maybe we had some money from Amazon to also like support some salaries and so pay our actors well. I still think it was such a strong, big, bold, beautiful show.
Yes.
I mean, it was full of story, like big, heartfelt monologues. Like, I feel like our scenic, like for the first time we brought on like a sound guy and a lighting guy, another producer. Like we had some support there to put up this thing, but it was the most ambitious and big show from scenic design, but it was also the most challenging. We finally found our space in a bottom of a basement. So like trying to load a show in a freight elevator, right? Like it all came with complications. But it was cool. And
it happened fast.
It happened fast. It was about a 60-minute show pulsed through with a post-show lounge. So we just had flipped what we had done previously with entry and made the lounge come at the end so guests could hang longer if they chose.
And it was such a good, every year we get these nice lessons that we don't expect. And so this was the first year that we have to make sure that we're over-delivering for ourselves. It's something that we goal ourselves on. But our audience obviously has to like it, just in other years. But now we have that third party that we also have to keep happy, and we have to ensure that we're over-delivering for them. So it really made us, regardless of the struggles that we had in finding the place, we still had to figure out ways to over-deliver, be agile, be nimble. And you really learn who your core team is. You really learn who's in it to win it. And you all just have to dig deep and make things happen. And we're lucky that everyone dug deep and made great things happen, and that the client was happy, and we had a lot of fun, and we had an amazing cast that worked incredibly
Really
hard. Very hard. Probably the hardest in any of our seasons.
Oh yeah, we were doing 26 shows a night. 26 shows a night.
That was actually the most difficult show I've ever performed in my whole life. Like in all of my huge shows where I'm literally dancing my face off for an hour, like Lore was the most challenging mentally and physically for me. I was in a room by myself for how many hours we were in there, and
full of feathers.
Yeah, full of feathers, couldn't breathe, had no friends, by myself with all these hanging dolls, and I had to just keep dancing on this hard floor over and over and over and over again, stay warm in between, and like just being in there by myself. Like I was that character. Like I was like braiding their hair, and like it was just happening way too naturally. But it was the hardest performance I've ever done. But it was fun.
Yeah. Yeah.
We were able to go to the Amazon offices, and we had, what was it, an hour?
We had about an hour
to read all the scripts for the upcoming episodes, and we had to pull content from those episodes, period. And we had an hour to do that, and we got to see a little bit of a rough cut of one of the TV episodes, just a chunk of it. And I mean, I dived into the podcast episode. I had already listened to the podcast and dove into those episodes really hard, and so we just had to pull content from all of those episodes. And luckily, unfortunately, there was a lot in those episodes to pull from. So we just felt what we connected with each episode, and then sort of fleshed it out, on our own, and wrote a script. And the only note, we got 2 notes on the script. The only notes for the script was more of Robert the Doll. We have to say Robert the Doll's name, and the other was we don't like the font for the word lore. Which I was like, oh, okay. I can fix that in the script, no problem. And that was it. That was it. So they seemed happy with what we did. We pulled what we liked and thought was interesting, and then we were off to the races. It was funny because we already were working on whatever our creep show was going to be that fall, and we were able. It sort of aligned a little bit. So I was still able, and we were still able to sort of incorporate the themes that we were already working on, and just apply them towards some of this content. And some of that was sort of the changeling idea of thinking somebody that you know and love has been replaced, and is instead some evil creature masquerading as that person that you love. So we had a scene in sort of an old, beautiful stone sort of cottage that, you know, a mother thinks her daughter has been replaced by this changeling because she's speaking her mind, because she's flirting with making out with a boy in the woods, and they end up sort of throwing her into the fire because they believe she's this evil creature. And we're still able to pull from our our strength of real life terror. Is she a changeling? Is she a fairy? I don't think so, but that there's that fear there. And so for me, I thought that was a really exciting moment. One of the other things we were pulling from was Mercy Brown, who's the first American vampire, and we got to have this beautiful graveyard with actual coffins that we had custom built, and Kylie Thurman was this beautiful vampire, and she would pull guests into a coffin and have this one-on-one beautiful moment that only one guest per show would get to experience.
And it was incredible. I mean, I was just sitting here thinking that moment for me was probably the most impactful. I mean, I went to Home Depot and bought the mulch that went into that thing, and still the first time I saw the scene, I cried. You know what I mean? Like, it was so moving and so impactful, and it was one of those things where you're just like, it feels so special and so intimate, which I think is something that we are known for as a brand. It's just giving people those intimate moments, but it's also one of those things where you're just like, everybody needs to see this. Like, she's so amazing.
The funny thing about that scene, a true story, and it taught us on the producing side the integrity of our company and our work, is that scene actually Amazon wanted us to cut because they thought that it went too far. And that was the one time that we had a discussion with them on trust us, trust our audiences, let us do what we know is best. I promise you it won't go too far. And luckily they allowed us to do it, because I do think it was one of the more beautiful scenes, and for us it was a good moment in being able to want to please we always want to please our clients, but at the same time hold on to the integrity of what we feel is right for the show.
And lore was theatrical. I think it was like one of the strongest casts we've had, and it was like heavy on script, heavy on dialogue. And I think that was a real turning point for our company, not just because of the partnership we had aligned with them, but the way I think we were approaching our work and the way that we were going to then set ourselves and go in after coming off of the Willows before even, which was so script heavy. Going into lore, it just felt right, and it really, I think, changed the game from us looking at ourselves as like redefining the haunted house. I think we were really just focused on telling like dark horror stories in a sense. My brain, it's really wonderful because these guys normally just like yes, 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 yes. My brain always starts off with a floor plan and a map, and ideally it's like woods, cabin, graveyard, ward, hospital. And luckily, Daniel, then after we then sit down, we then can kind of write a narrative through that. But as far as like building those worlds, like, we brought on Shannon Knox, and she came on and helped us with that. Chase White. And we really spent a lot of time. That was a lot of labor in that show to put that show up, because we knew the quality had to be there. And so we worked pretty effortlessly to make those scenes feel real, so those stories felt real.
Advice for creators. Yeah, I mean, part of it I think is something that JT was touching on with like making sure that in the conversations that you're having full transparency about what your creative vision is, and reminding them every step of the way as gently as you can why they hired you in the first place. Because that can get kind of murky, because the client's always going to have something that they say that they want, and then you're going to show them something and they're going to go, oh, I don't know, or maybe that's too far, or maybe it's too much, and maybe we're not quite ready to go there. And so just being willing to like, speak with authority as, you know, as humbly as possible, but like, you hired us for a reason. Like, this is the vision. Over communicate with your client as much as you possibly can, but also don't be afraid to push back on them because they will. They're coming in with the money, and they're gonna have some things to say about it, and that's okay. But you want to make sure that your artistic integrity is intact all the way through the process.
Always allow for more time.
Yeah.
You know,
that's
like
good.
we started kind of late in the game with those conversations again, like in July. That
Mm-hmm.
came to us, and so we really did shift. But I would say, like, always try to give yourself like that 12-week
Yes.
at least before you're really trying
Plan.
to give yourself that time, because there really seems to never be enough time.
And also, don't undersell yourself just because you want to do the project. Know your worth. I can't, like, that's probably my best piece of advice for artists who are entering this space, because I feel like companies like ours, we've been very fortunate, and we're getting approached over and over again, so we're getting better and better about it, like strength to strength every time. If you're a new creator and a brand partnership comes to you, make sure that you like evaluate the thing that's being asked against your time and your artistry, and that you ask for the thing that you need. Know your worth, because you're in the room for a reason, you know?
Stephanie, you want to 2018
Sure.
Awake? What a nightmare.
Yeah, wait.
What a nightmare.
What a living nightmare.
I thought it was a dream come true, honestly.
Yeah, I'm sure. Awake was a huge show for us. It was the biggest, physically, literally, how many square feet?
60,000.
60,000 square feet of warehouse space, completely empty for the most part, that we had to fill with like 30 people. 30 people just as far as like our group and our cast.
Yeah.
And it was a narrative about your nightmares, about what's happening in our head when we go to sleep at night, and how it translates into normal life, again with the same like the creeps that are in our brain at night are the creeps that haunt us in our days. And it was also very whimsical. I would say it's one of our most whimsical shows we've had. And truly, I think that was one of our strongest casts. Well, every year it gets better
Yeah,
and
we always
better.
say
That was a really strong cast.
It was.
But I think we really touched on in that show all of the different scenarios that scare and that affect an audience. So like the voyeur, the participant, you know, all those different methods that we've used over the years. It was just a big show of all of those different types. And we involved a couple dancers again. We're like always expanding. I feel like we had a couple big whole cast numbers, like our finale. That was a whole lot of movement.
We had big
Yeah.
we had big creatures which we'd never used before.
Yeah.
We had
Puppets,
We had bigger
yeah.
tech
puppets.
than ever before.
We had projection mapping
Yeah.
that we'd never worked with before.
Changed our whole format and
Everything.
structure of like how you entered the experience. For the first time after 4 years, you now went in as a group of 25 rather than these like small mini pods, and then we broke you apart once, but you all came in together and you all finished together, but your worlds and experiences were so far apart from each other when we pushed you through probably what, a 40, 50,
It was 60
like
minutes.
60
60,
minutes.
65, something like that.
experience,
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that was a year that we had to get really. The space was actually given to us as if it hadn't been touched in years. We walked in and there was about that much dust on the floor, and we were so lucky that year we had partners, and we thought, you know, why don't we just give Casper a call and just see if they'd be interested. I know they have a great program that gives back, and luckily they jumped on board and donated the mattresses for us, so we were able to put our guests to sleep to start the show.
In
and
a
kind of flip the
comfortable
script.
Casper
Very
room.
so it was a really cool beginning. To me, it's my favorite beginning of a show because
Yeah.
people
Yeah.
certainly didn't know what to expect. It immediately made people uncomfortable. And the song that we used to put people to bed was even eerie, and it really set the tone for the rest of the show.
Yeah, we really loved the song that we used because it was the same choir group for the first 3 years of our Creep song. So it still like was so on brand,
Still
but
on
it was a
brand.
different song that sung you to bed before. So it was fun.
So for Awake, instantly had all these nightmare figures in my brain, just there, ready. It was actually so easy to write. There's the character of the salesman who I was playing, and one of the movies that scared me the most when I was little was Poltergeist 2. Just ruined my life. And in Poltergeist 2, there's the figure of Reverend Kane who comes knocking on the door, and he's just a creepy old man. And he has this, Amish style sort of hat. And the idea that this nightmare man could just show up to your screen door and try and, beg to come in really messed me up when I was young. And so there was the vision of that sort of character that just screams nightmare to me. And at the same time, I listen to a lot of podcasts. I do a lot of research. I read a bunch of stuff about murder and scary things. It's just what I like to spend my time on. And I had been listening to this podcast about black-eyed children and this sort of urban legend of a salesman figure coming up to your door and making his way into your home, and all that sort of blended together. And I instantly thought, I know what this person, I know it's the scariest thing I can think of, so I want to see what that looks like. And we originally had a mask for me for that was very terrifying, and we used the mask for the weekend of previews, and then we realized me without the mask was a lot scarier, and so we relied on some black contacts. And Stephanie had this we all had this sort of beautiful vision of for the costumes, having everything be just nude tones. And so combining this sort of salesman figure with a black briefcase, a black hat, and this dirty nude colored suit, and nude colored fingerless gloves, gross. It just was an odd image, and it scared a lot of people. And we ended up bringing that character back for a show we did for the Overlook Film Festival called Room Service. That was basically just a 10-minute experience with that character. I also wrote a children's book that that Stephanie Delziri illustrated, that we basically made and still sell, of the story of this, Mr. Black man who shows up to the door. Here comes Mr. Black, and basically steals people's screams through this weird briefcase with a cassette, playing a cassette tape, normal stuff. And so that was one of the figures. Another nightmare sort of creature was Mr. Fingers, which again was instantly, I just had a vision for what that looked like. A shrouded figure with long fingers. And there's something about touch that is unnerving, of course, that we play on, so why not take that to its extreme and have this sort of creature from under the bed with terrifyingly long fingers, and have this, this girl Sophie tell her story of, this was this creature that she would encounter at night in her dreams, and it became sort of like our monster show in some ways.
Yeah, it was the first year that I think we then turned and we were like, monsters. How can we now shine a light on monsters, in a sense?
It also was a good year for us to incorporate even more dance. I mean, Stephanie did a great job in the choreography side, with making things equally scary and beautiful at the same time. And I think using a space that big, we had to get really smart on messing with people's head to make sure that they didn't know how much space that they were playing in. So that's where we brought in some of the projection mapping and a lot of the fog or the stuff like that to just really disassociate people with the space around them. But certainly a nice mixture of monsters and scary iconic figures and dance and it just
surreal,
really gorgeous imagery.
Yeah.
And the center of the show was this sort of thunderstorm moment that brought everybody together, and we had Kylie standing on this podium, frozen, lip syncing to her own voice. And we had this beautiful, that was a rough year for me personally, y'all. And I was pulling from some stuff that I had been sort of going through, and wrote this sort of monologue for her to say about how she was having trouble sleeping and these nightmares that she'd been having, and being chased by this bat, and we had this beautiful digital sort of backdrop of these windows being ripped apart by this insane storm that turned into a crazy wild strobe light rave, and that we twisted guests around and shoved them into a crazy seminar for people who decided to stop sleeping. Sure.
Why not?
Awake was literally the biggest show we had done as far as volume, but again, we were off on our own Like, we weren't associated. We didn't have any money supporting the show. So again, it was like, how do we top lore, right? So like, we knew we were gonna probably blow people away with the vast size of it. But unfortunately, like with every gift that you get, you run into so many problems. So like, we went into a space that didn't have any power. We had to build a show that could only fit within an 8x10 elevator, like literally loading up because the freight was broken. So how we were going to come up with the idea of like building dividers and like so it was like almost unlocking these doors. So we partitioned and made like little dividers with like over 300 doors we had brought in to again allow people to go like, which door are you going to enter, what brain moment are you going to access, and so Awake, and I think like sound really built heavy with sound. It just like rumbled through the whole space. So I think sound was like a really crucial.
The windows.
The
windows. Oh my goodness.
60,000 square feet of
windows
that we had to cover with newspaper.
We could
This
have
guy right here.
we could have
Yeah.
just covered it with trash bags or
This
something,
guy.
but no, we wanted it to be.
How long did
And
it
by
take?
we, I mean Justin.
Forever.
It's definitely.
And so, I mean, the two of them did most of that heavy lifting. But I would just say, like, it wasn't enough to just cover it. It was how do we cover it in a way that makes sense for the story that we want to tell? Because you're gonna see it in every single scene. And so we just like ripped apart a bunch of fucking books. And
Logistically,
Yeah.
it was the hardest year, I think, for me, because during show we had over 100 fire detectors that were going off.
The fire.
And so we would have to cover them, and it took us an entire day to cover them all. And then we found out the building had to do a walkthrough the next day and had removed all of them. So we had to do it all back again. And it kept continuously happening to where we found out just how safe that building is. And there's even fire detectors within the air ducts. So we had to go figure that out.
They had just
They
replaced it. They had
yeah.
just upgraded. That was the one thing that had actually been done in this space. There was no
Yeah.
power,
But they had brand new-
but they had brand new fire alarms
Should we talk about the elevator?
and
And then we
sprinklers.
had the elevator sitch.
Oh no.
God.
The thing, and it really is just a story on continuously just moving forward. There's things that are going to happen in a show that can either debilitate you or you keep it moving. And for this particular show, you know, the blessing in disguise on that one is we got really, really close with the LAFD and the chief of fire. Like, I know him very well, and that's proven to be effective. But then also, mid-show, we had a malfunction within the elevator with guests on it. And so...
Yes, and Noelle, a performer,
And
was
Noelle,
in
one of
there,
our
and the elevator got
performers.
stuck for 45 minutes.
So,
And they didn't know at first that was happening.
So she
So
stayed
Noelle's
in
vamping.
character.
She stayed in character.
stayed in character for the 45 minutes. So
the fire department showed up and pulled them out of the elevator.
they did, and all the while the show kept going on. No other guests realized that was happening,
No.
and more importantly, the guests that came out of the elevator, I was down at the bottom ready. I had a water bottle for everyone. I wanted to make sure the guests were okay. They
could
all
take their
came
photo
out
in the
just
photo booth.
talking immediately about how great the show was, and so that's when you just know. It's just keep moving and make sure it's fixed and ensure everyone's comfortable and people will go
Just
along with
fix
you.
it.
Everyone felt safe.
Yeah.
Everyone felt secure. No one at any point felt like they were in danger. And you just have to be agile and fix it and move on and move forward and stay positive and always to go to advice maybe for people putting on these shows. Always have a plan in place. Always know that your cast needs to know that there's a plan in place. There's safety precautions. They know what to do and when should something arise. And luckily in that moment, we never really planned for that. But because we have steps in place, people jumped right into place where they needed to be. It was fixed and no one really knew that
noticed.
it happened.
Awake, we got like in the best shape of our lives too, because like Misha Reeves, like she'd wear like a little Fitbit, and we were walking like 15 to 16 a night.
Yes.
In a venue like
Some of the
that.
stops.
Oof.
And then we all went down on the old plague, and our whole
You
cast.
tail.
Oh, we had a zombie
Oh, that's a
apocalypse.
story.
Like,
oh my God.
was it 9 of us?
Yeah.
Me
Yeah.
included.
Yeah.
I think it's top 2 sickest I've ever been in my life. Never missed a show.
Just swept
Like,
through us though.
Stomach flu, bucket next to all of our scenes.
Crazy.
Like,
It lasted about a week and a half.
I lost 15 pounds.
Yeah, it was intense.
Yeah.
It was
Yeah.
a
But we
night.
There was
did.
one night in particular, it was a Sunday night, and thank God because it was like reached critical mass with the number of people that were sick in the space at once.
It was out of control.
Yeah, we
But
were wearing medical
Too
masks
much.
in between.
And I was
As
walking
like,
around with like
I was,
hand
stretching.
sanitizer
Yeah.
downstage.
like we powered through.
Yeah.
You know, like nobody balked at that. They're like, here we go.
And we were very cognizant of it, that we also have guests coming in. So we would go in every day and we'd Clorox everything.
So much Lysol.
So much
So
Lysol.
much.
So much.
It's one thing for our cast to be sick and we'll make sure we take care of them, but if we're not getting guests sick, that's a whole bigger problem. So we were very, very on top of it to ensure that didn't happen. So, but it was an interesting 2 weeks, that's for sure.
We made it.
We
Yeah.
made it.
There was maybe less touch in the show those 2 weeks. House of Creep. How do you even talk about it? I mean, for me, it was like an acid tripping fever dream. It was just essentially like a social commentary. People are always thinking that we're making social commentaries with our shows anyway, and Daniel's answer is always yes.
Yeah,
no matter what they
people are like,
say.
is this show about this? I always say yes.
Yes.
You're right.
And this year, or last year, I guess it was 2019, we kind of did make a social commentary on the state of our world and social media and how people relate to art, and how art certainly has a dark side when you're trying to curate and cultivate so much and control everything, that can spiral out of control. That was kind of the overarching theme, but it was also just, and if you were really paying attention, you got that. But even if you weren't, it was just, this show was like nasty and sexy and kind of dirty and wrong in a lot of ways that were so much fun, I think, for all of us to explore. And we didn't just explore with like new themes, we were also exploring with new formats. So that idea of open world sandbox style was brand new for us and presented its own unique challenges, but I think we really had a good time with it because it allowed the show to kind of take on this organic, like, snowball, like, nature of its own, and the show itself kind of became a character on its own, you know what I mean? Because every character, every time you interacted with a guest, you just didn't know. It was very, very different than like being on a track, right? It was just, anything can happen. I actually got stuck. I was not supposed to be in the show, and I got stuck inside because we locked the door. Do you remember this?
Yes.
Locked the door to backstage. Daniel
Yes.
and I had a moment. And I'm like walking through, and one of the actors sees me and comes up and is like interacting with me, and I just beeline for the back door, and I hit the door to the stage, and it's locked. And at this point, there's a group of audience that is gathered around, and they're watching this like it's a scene. And it's not, but they're watching it, so we turned it into one. And I'm literally going, Dennis, and I'm snapping, and I just started saying, this is why I never come in here. And I'm banging on the door, and finally Daniel opens the door, and I go in, and I was like, you are here, and this is now, and I slam the door.
My little
And I was like, scene!
Yeah, scene.
And I'm like, what was that? No idea what that was. It was insane. And it only happened once. And so only those like 15 people that gathered around ever got to experience that. And that's okay. Because there were a lot of things that were happening over the course of the show that only ever happened the one time because of the nature of the way that we built it.
We were returning to, we were going back home to the Row, right? So ultimately, coming from this big show for us at Row, there was going to be instant comparisons. And the space that we ended up finding in was the smallest space in 5 years that we had to work with.
Yeah. We went from the biggest
big
to the
challenge.
smallest.
And we wanted to do kind of our biggest show. And to me too, like we needed to, as a business, and we needed to grow. We needed to double our audience. On average, we were getting everywhere between like 35 to 4,200 people through our doors throughout a season, and with Creep, we got just under 7,000. So we really grew our show. We changed the format, right? To me, I think the way people have looked at us, like we're trying to always reinvent the wheel, and I think because the medium and the form is so different and unique, we kind of wanted to be the first kind of group to try to tackle open world and see what that looked like in sort of a horror genre. And we were pulling from the influence of like everyone loves a good selfie museum. Well, what if this selfie museum was alive and fought back? And that was kind of a way to get a guest count of 25 from year one. Now we had 50 guests coming into our show at a time. And we were able to allow, for the first time, guests the opportunity to discover and explore. So if you felt comfortable and you wanted to spend your time in the lounge, then that was you and that was your experience. So I would say at the end of the day, no show is the same for any 7,000 people. And I think that was special, because I think that kind of gave us the idea of, this works, and then these are the faults within that sandbox model. So again, it allowed us to really, if you don't do it, how do you know, right? So House of Creep allowed us to really figure some things out.
I'd say that's probably the proudest show that I have of the group, because there was some serious debate on whether we should try that or not. And I think it was a good lesson in you continuously evolving, do it differently, do it better. How do we step out of our comfort zone consistently? And so we jumped into it. And were there some struggles? Yes. Did we learn it a lot? Yes. But I think that as a group, it really challenged us, and it challenged the team. It was certainly stressful, but we were able to learn from it and adapt and really take on a lot of information that our guests were giving us. And hopefully that was proven throughout the show. And I was super proud of that show. I think the team came together really well. I thought it was really smart. I think if people wanted to play, that was the one time I think that we put the onus on the audience to really play their part and to really get involved. And when they did, they would uncover little sprinkles of information, and watching them continuously to want to get more and more and more was really exciting to watch.
Yeah, and technically we really, I think, upped our game too. This is the first time we had like a full light grid in a show, and
drywall
and we had we had
cameras.
We had played around with sound and awake, but then we took it to the next level in the show. We had cameras in show. There were a lot of things going on. There was merch, right? People have been asking.
A creep store.
Yeah, and I think in that way, as a company, it was almost this might sound strange, but it was like a proof of concept for the future, for where we can go. And we were really pushing ourselves every step of the way on the production side to see how can we best ourselves, how can we up our game, and really take that next step into just strength to strength, and just one more step forward in the professional arena. And I'm as a producer, having gone through the process, extremely proud of that show.
And people loved and hated that show.
Yeah.
Right? But 'tis art, I guess, right?
Yeah.
But I feel like coming from 2015, a haunted house show, I feel like we had led people with us, and I think we went so left field on House of Creep, and I think it was for the better. And I think it was such a great show. To know where we originally all sat and said where we wanted to be and what we wanted to do, and to know that the things that Daniel got to write X amount of scenes, that Stephanie got to choreograph X amount of numbers. We had an opening with big lights and a big sound, and truly I think for me it was it reached a new audience too, which was cool.
Yeah.
When you're in an open world, instead of having actors be able to guide the audience, we have to be able to have eyes on everyone. So yeah, we incorporated cameras, but yes, Daniel and Justin and Steph were all characters, but they were also eyes for the show, right? So they're acting in the show, but especially Cash was in ear the whole night, so we could keep tracks on where people were, what people were doing, if someone was kind of wandering on their own, how to go find them, if someone was misbehaving, how to go get them.
Handle them.
And so yeah, they had to kind of play two roles, be a character and be kind of the eyes and ears on operation going forward at the same time.
Yeah.
But it was fun because we had never really all played together.
Oh yeah.
We never had really, and that was our ultimate goal was we wanted to start making this work to just selfishly put ourselves in it. Yeah. And so the first year, it kind of all just sort of worked out. We did it, and it was. I think that was a good highlight for us too.
That was the most challenging show for me to write, for sure. And I wish we had months and months and months to. It's basically you're writing an hour-long show for 20 different characters, So there was a lot of playroom in that. And that was also kind of one of those, in a way, going back to your one, it felt like learning as you go. Because it's a scripted show for sure. There's a whole script of it. But, with a lot of our shows, usually with our shows, we kind of try and say it's it's 80% scripted, 20% improv. And that was maybe more of a 60-40, I would probably say. And it's really those like in-between moments of getting to the scripted scenes, how you stay in character and then just drop into that scene so it feels seamless. And there's just so many variables specifically for an open world situation where it'll never be the same. So as a performer, you have to adapt and then pull back to that script. So fortunately, you know, the cast that we had for House of Creep was really experienced, most of them, and even the ones that were sort of new to this style of storytelling were able to step up to sort of the plate, as much as I hate sports references, and like really deliver. So there's a lot of trust that goes into, you know, the performers, and in order to hold up the integrity of that script and that story. And of course, there are going to be moments that you have to do a lot of improvisation to get the story back on track. But that's also kind of the fun of it, in a way. So we're crafting a history, a set of characters, relationships, beats that you need to hit, and then trusting that we've all done the work and all the actors can fill in sort of those gaps in character, in story. Obviously, acknowledging what's in front of them first and foremost and responding to that and bringing it back to the script. And it was constantly a challenge to do that. And, you know, I like to have a lot of control as a writer and make sure, you know, everybody's sticking to the script. And for the most part, you're surrounded by such good people that know what they're doing, that they are able to always bring it back to that text and make sure the story gets told.
House of Creep really reminds me of Entry 2016 Lounge and how we designed that lounge. I mean, it was kind of like on a repeat of an hour of beats to hit, and then it would repeat. And it reminded me of that because you only had like 4 things to actually do. And so between those 4 things, like you had to just do something. So it was such a different type of endurance as a performer, because like you really can't take a break. Like you have to be on, you have to make those moments in between into things. And if it's not written for you, you have to find something, but it also has to be specific to push the collective narrative. So like it's very, very easy to just go off the rails and have your own show, but like you really have to hone it in and really feel like, okay, why would my character do this to help the whole show move forward, but also keep it interesting and keep shock value and surprises alive.
It was the first time where we didn't have the audience, you know, like we weren't guiding, ushering, leading. So it was the first time sometimes where we would be in scene and realize like, oh, this is a huge moment and there's no one in the room, right? So like it was a learning devices for us to like take and go, right? Because like we're making it all, not all up. We're literally making all of our ideas come to life, right? We're literally creating this thing, and I know that sounds so big, but like ultimately, you more and more we've done it, and the more we are trying to do more of it, I think we'll just continue to like figure out what our audiences are resonating with.
And I think this was the year that we really had to learn active listening. Because, you know, in other shows, as we're guiding audiences, there's still scenes going on. But in this particular show, you had to actively listen to our guests and play with them while still knowing what's going on in the show and moving it forward. So it was a great training, in my opinion, for the actors. And anytime I was back bartending or whatever, I would watch and I would just listen. And it's just an art to watch them active listen and continuously improve their active listening so they could remember names towards the end of the show, or they remember a conversation they had at the beginning. And those little tiny touches make a big difference in an audience's experience.
Yeah, Living Art found its character from, I guess, what we wanted those characters to like represent in the world a little bit, or like this is where this character needs to beat throughout, and then Daniel much like will like landscape how the flow of the show looks, as long as Daniel kind of knows the course of the direction of where that character needs to get to. He's just got a brilliant mind to color within, you know, those guidelines. As far as the art goes, as a creative, like I generally try to just support and champion everyone in their own lanes and let people run, right? And so when we had originally started like sourcing and pulling together all this artwork, our original idea was to just create that, what's the image like that's like, how can we set images with an already existing big grand pieces of art? So how can we like create horror art but in like already like, am I saying this right?
Take something beautiful and then make it wrong. Like
Yeah.
how do we plus that in a way that...
And because Stephanie Delaziri is like a mastermind, before we knew it, she had created and literally painted 22 original pieces of art in 3 weeks.
Yeah.
And that was just her, you know, that was just her.
She just
and we knew because of what she was able to do, that our ultimate goal at the end of the thing was going to be able to pay her ultimately. And so we did this big silent auction at the end of our run. That all went back to her. So it was a cool thing for, I think, us to like also like showcase someone that again had found us and had become like a fan of ours by like coming to our scene, and then ultimately us being like, let's use your talents and let's have you jump in on this. So she had joined us in 2018, and then we kind of wanted to really feature her art in 2019.
We also what I thought was interesting was, you know, for Awake, everything was, I'm sort of going to be speaking for Stephanie and cut me off at any point. We had come from a nude sort of color palette, like that's sort of like a bare canvas. And we knew for House of Creep, we wanted things to be bold, bright, neon, impactful. So the art was all, you know, based around color. So the costumes and the characters each had sort of a color that was bold and bright. And then, you know, the opposite of that, the company, the characters that ran the exhibit would only be wearing black and white with little pops of color here and there. But we wanted to visually create a difference between this bold, shocking, strong, weird art and sort of the, you know, the plainness of the people running the exhibit, the corporation sort of running this strange art exhibit, you know. So there was a lot of inspiration through color and sort of character types that we knew that we wanted to create for those living creeps, those art pieces.
Yeah, that was probably one of our biggest costume years as far as like budget-wise, and just kind of like putting the most time and energy and thought into every single character, just because the interactions were going to be so constant. It wasn't like you're passing through a room and you don't have time to notice the old lady's shawl matches her breeches. It's like, no, this person is going to be spending a good amount of time with Sally. So we got to know what earrings she's wearing, if she has bows in her hair, what color tights she's wearing, does she have tights underneath those tights, what kind of undies are she wearing, because those are going to show. Like all these things like had to go into it, and we spent like every dime of the budget. Sorry, JT. And
crushed it.
But they had to be in and of themselves pieces of art and interesting enough to look at for a long period of time.
And I think we were able to shine a light on some good artistry too. We were talking about like Stephanie Delaziri as far as like doing artwork, but we were able to bring in like an actual like puppeteer who like, and we actually had like a marionette like Boppo character that we were able to like incorporate another type, because I think for us it's just like the world is endless, and I think for us, like whether it's magic or whether it's puppetry, like how can we continue to infuse our world with all these other different forms to make people's brains go.
We also had Zach, who was one of our performers and also is an artist and would draw people during the show and use that as I got to draw like during the show, you know, so we wanted to use as much artistry as we could for that. You know, so it's a good balance of stuff. I just love that we had a marionette with a pop-out Venus. When I write stuff for our shows, usually I'll write what makes me and my twisted sense of humor laugh. So, and a lot of times there's that line between like scary and funny for me. And sometimes I'll write crazy stuff, send it to Justin, and hope he'll just say, yeah, that's good. Like, and we'll just do it.
Usually, yeah.
And I'm like, okay. And so Justin had the idea of having sort of a nasty marionette puppet sort of speaking to basically to children. And we sort of very briefly talked about it, and I just it snapped in my brain. I wrote a wild scene of this puppet Bappo who's, you know, giving tips on how to live as an adult, and they're horrifying, terrible, awful tips, and it's nasty and gross and weird. It involves a lot of choking for some reason, and it just came out of me, and I'm so grateful that you were on board for that and said absolutely yes. And we were able to actually get a puppet, and for me, that scene, I got to hear it. I never got to see it during the show, of course, but hearing that scene just really tickled me very deeply. I thought it was so different, so out of left field, like so strange that, you know, and sometimes people liked it, sometimes people didn't, sometimes people were shocked by it. I just thought it was really nasty. And I love that we did it. And
it was cool because in House of Creep, you know, maybe fans would notice this, but there was like 3 big bodied, like bigger group number scenes, you know, whether you were with Mr. Happy or whether you were with Sally and Bappo. So ultimately, like, you were pulling half of your audience flow into 2 big hubs. So it allowed for intimacy to like live in these other one-on-ones. And then it like rotated. And like, much like, you know, we would like, whether it be a sticker or whether it be a birthday hat, it was a nice trick and tool for us to go like, that person has been there, great, you know, and we were able to guide guests and push guests across the space to know like, oh, they've really spent a lot of time south, but they've never spent much time in the art gallery with Margaret or with Kit Kat in the lounge. And so we were really able to manipulate and kind of pull people by just like, by wearing a visual marker on them.
There was a fun scene that wasn't actually written in the show, that was inspired. One day Kristin came in and was like, oh, I have this riding crop whip in my car, I don't know, maybe someone can use it. And suddenly like that became one of like the biggest scenes for Kit Kat in the show, where she literally tells an audience member to whip her with a riding crop. So that was probably the most like vulnerable I have ever been in any of the shows. But to see, it's what JT was talking about earlier, to see other people feeling like they shouldn't be watching but can't look away, like that's such a powerful thing. And even if like I'm literally like leaning over and looking at someone completely different dead in the eyes for longer than 3 seconds while someone else is whipping me, like it was just so effective. And I had bruises on my ass.
The whole run.
Still
She's probably still bruised.
They were
But
pretty intense.
I do it again. But it was so fun, and it was like, and it started off like just a scene with me and Yannicka making out for shock value, and then suddenly it turned into this long scene where then Stacy came in and he was watching with the camcorder, and it was like people were just walking through, like just those are the moments that were just so organic that, like you said, how immersive work just kind of like you find what works, and then it's like a snowball. You just keep going and going and going, and before you know it, you have this like amazing thing. Yeah. And you're like, wow, all right.
It's funny that you say that. I feel like in this show, now that I'm thinking about it, props were actually very important to the storytelling.
Collars
in the show, collars, like all of those little details became of paramount importance because you had to like very quickly pivot and maybe use it in a new way or find new ways to kind of do the thing, and you always had it rather than just this is my prop and this is my blocking and reset and repeat. It wasn't that at all, and you just never know. It's also a really good lesson. Never throw away a good whip. You never know when you're gonna need it.
Our reputation it's very common for people to think like we're such a good family, and I feel that way, our actors feel that way, and I think it truly stems from our leader and just his overall vibe. He's exceptionally brilliant. I know I'm just saying this, not just saying this because he's my best friend, but like he's exceptionally brilliant, but he's also exceptionally humble. And I think that transparency, the humility, the fact that all of us are performers at heart. We're all actors. We've all been through the grind here in Los Angeles. We already have that brotherhood, sisterhood going on. And at the core of it, it's like all we want to do is perform. All we want to do is perform with our best friends. And I think Justin and the rest of the team has really facilitated this open arms environment. And we're always available to our actors. And we try to include everyone, and I think it just stems from all of us just enjoying genuinely being around each other.
And I just like, it's like a grace, like Misha Reeves been every single one of our shows. Daniel went to high school.
I went to North Carolina School of the Arts.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying? So like they got
know,
reconnected in a world
16.
16 years old, right? And like a person like Melinda Decay, who like literally paved and made the Willows everything it was. Like there's people who are talented, and then there's people that you just want to just bring in your world because you trust them, the way they work for us, and ultimately, like to me, I like being a guy who didn't feel like I ever got to really take a deep dive into the world of the arts as far as an actor in Los Angeles. Cultivating community was number one, and I think since we've done that, and we've built a roster of over 100 artists over the last 5 years that like literally, why hold auditions when you can just pick up the phone and pull from it. But I also, with that too, like there is so much fandom that has come from the fans who like Haunting, like who you guys have just backed us and supported us and trusted us, and that ultimately, like without the thank you to that of like the family and the fans who are supporting us, without my mother coming in and supporting me, and like from selling tickets year one to like helping us sell merch at the end, like we're a husband-owned company. I work with my best friends. Like sometimes I'm like, we're just so damn lucky,
I'd say that I think ecosystem is really, really important to us, and we've known that we'd rather have people around us that we trust 100%. But I think the rule of being a leader 101 is to surround yourself with people that are better than you and smarter than you and more talented than you, and then watch them do what they do best. And I think it's just an added value that we all happen to be friends with each other too. And it is, you kind of have to pinch yourself every now and again that you have such talented people that you trust and are willing to know what we're in it for, and know the importance of it, and that this is the most important thing. Everything else will just come.
I put it out there. I put out there that 2019, our fifth year was it for Creep. We've changed it up so drastically year after year. Like we're really coming from the principle of like where we came from, and to show see where we were in 2019. Like they're not even in the same boat or world anymore. And I think we as a company have evolved and have grown so much too from like our flagship baby, which has like also allowed us to blossom into so many other partnerships, or writing an unbelievable show like The Willows. And I there comes, I think, a time too, as an actor, you never know, like, is it just another credit? Is it just another, us doing another year? What is it for us? And I think there comes a lot of pressure from us too. Year after year, we always try to get bigger and better and better, and trying to create intimate storytelling and intimate moments with small audiences, with big production values, with a grand cast that you want to pay fairly. It's everything starts to the margins and the time and the commitment, it all kind of starts to balance. So like JT always says, like, you've built a brand, we've built this nice little flagship. And to me, I think just because of the conversations we have recently had, I didn't know if Creep was going to be feasible for us to do this year, because of some possible other opportunities. So I think by saying to ourselves, like, we ended up on a really big note, and I felt confident knowing that, like, for this to be a passion project that all my friends just said, yeah, we're down, for us to be where we are 5 years later and to literally show up to work and us do this for a career now, we did that. And I think everyone needs that project that gives you life and takes you to the next. And I think that's ultimately, for me, I'm like, what's next? What's not, what can we do for ourselves next if it's not within like a Halloween season? Anyone else want to say? They're probably all like biting their lip.
No, I'm like sitting here actually choking up. I mean, this company actually changed my life. You know what I mean? Like, and I think with Creep coming into a space into, you know, kind of midway through and being so embraced by all of the people sitting in this room and also our actors and our extended family, I guess we'll call them that, to have been a part of the last 3 seasons and to have been a part of the growth of the company, so that at this point, you know, kind of putting Creep to bed and saying thank you to it and being ready to like step forward with JFI into the next thing is like really powerful and it's monumental for us, but it's also been like very monumental in my life. I'm trying not to cry, but it's like it's true. I think that there's a lot of power in the arts to transform lives, and there's a lot of power in this room and through these people. There's just like really, really good energy and synergy that happens here. And I can't wait to see what happens next. I actually think it's like putting Creep to bed is one of the most exciting decisions that we could be making as a company, because we've got a lot of fun things on the horizon, and it's going to free us up to like do bigger and better things.
That's exactly right. I think that's what clears up some misconceptions. Is this is just a chapter that allows us to, and hopefully our audience too, to step out of our comfort zones and keep being ambitious and keep, without these necessary changes, we can't explore things that we don't know. I always think it's you know what you know what you don't know, and then you don't even know what you don't know. That's the area we want to go play in next.
But I think we also discovered this past year in particular that we aren't just a one-trick pony, that we picked up projects that were completely out of our usual genre and we excelled. And I think there's a lot of room to grow down those avenues and explore immersive in other genres and in other events and curations and other brand activations and stuff that I would have never thought in a million years that, you know, in 2015, like, you would have told me, like, this is what we would be doing, and I would be costuming Jackie Kennedy for a immersive show in Malibu. I'd be like, you're insane.
Yeah.
But you did it, and you did it well.
And I did.
And she looked
Really
great.
And she
well.
looks
Really
stunning.
good.
But it's those types of adventures that were just, like, so random this year that showed that we can really do a lot of different things. I'm excited for that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know. The very first year, I remember there's 2 things. I remember seeing in that final sort of hallway of performers and mannequins wearing the same mask, and I was in that hallway providing some scares. There's a woman that walked down the hall, and I've never, ever seen anybody. I just have never seen a human being look like that. Just eyes this wide, mouth like completely open, and was like walking sort of like it was like we had ruined her brain, like we had destroyed her life and she had snapped, and there was like a glimmer of joy underneath it. I could just see for the first time that we were doing something that somebody had never, like, their brain couldn't process what was happening. And I think I ran to you after that moment and was like, I saw this woman and we have ruined her life. And
you were chuckling. I think
I was
like,
dying laughing,
yeah.
you know. And another moment that we had was, you know, the first year was just for fun. And our last night was Halloween night, and I remember grabbing Justin on the street out front and saying, "Oh, we gotta keep doing this. Like, we gotta do this again." And we both kind of looked at each other and thought, "Oh, we didn't really think about anything past Halloween." And we were like, "Okay, see you then." It was great.
And I was like, no.
Yeah.
And here I am.
What about you, Kristin?
Moment from Creep that stands out for me? I mean, there are a few.
Good or bad?
Good or bad. I know, right? You take the good, you take the bad. I think one of the most impactful moments for me was when we, our last night of Lore, when we were closing the show, because we had done this thing, we had started to do this thing like halfway through where the last turn of the 26 shows a night, people would come out into the hallway and stand in the hallway and the characters were like, you know.
Oh, yes.
You remember this?
Cool, yeah, yes.
Yeah, and it was just this moment of like, everybody's doing it and all the energy was so high, and it's the last turn of the 26th of the night of the full run. and
We all
getting that
gathered in
last
awe.
guest, and everybody's like following, like trailing guests, and you get that last guest through, and just the eruption of like joy from our cast, and for me, I was just like, I can never not do this.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I can
was
never not
special.
do this. It
Yeah.
was so special.
What about you, Jay?
I don't know. I think for me, there's so many definitely parts within the shows, but for me, I think I just watch how hard everyone works and how much their heart and soul they put into it, and every word is chosen, and all the training of the actors and all the just work. So for me, it's literally that initial audience, and when they come out, and they come out every year, and they're so supportive, and they clap at the end, and it moves me a lot, because we know, and I think even before Wake, I started just saying it to guests, which is like, we can't do this without guests, and the fact that they trust us and they come back, and like we put tickets on sale and they already sell. It just really shows the hard work that these guys put in, the team that we built, but then also the community that we just love so much and embrace, and the fact that we're embraced by them. It's just, to me, every year that's like a moment for me. It's just to see the faces and just be so grateful that they trust us and they continue allowing us to do this work.
Over the years, the way Creep kind of goes up and then the way it comes down, it's like it all happens so fast. And before we know it, after we've worked to the bone, literally, all of a sudden you're back at the space that is completely empty. It's like nothing ever happened. And I feel like over the years, there's like such this moment of like accomplishment and achievement, and like just this overwhelming feeling that like we created something, we came, we saw, we conquered, and then those moments where we're literally exhausted after we strike the whole show, and we're just like locking up, and suddenly it's like we're us again, and we're like who we are. But it's like, it's just such a humbling moment, and you're standing there locking up a door with your friends, and you're wearing the same clothes you've worn for like the past week, and you look like shit, you smell like shit. Yep. Let's go have a beer and let's talk about what's next. But it's like, it's such all those moments, like shoveling and the labor involved, and then just to step back and be like, wow, that just happened.
To that point, you're exactly right, though, because then we do go have a beer, and there's zero downtime. It's immediately,
It's like,
We're like, what do we
what's
do
the
next?
next
What's
thing?
coming
There's
out?
already idea. I mean, there's literally no, like,
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, what about you?
You know, I'm just so funny because I would just lead with the bad. You know, like most memorable moments. I don't know, the
Sure.
girl cracking her head, year one. Grant cracking his head, year two.
Opening night.
The pee, the vomit,
All
of
the pee,
pee,
lots of
theft.
pee.
Vomit.
Yeah.
The
the
choking.
oh yeah.
Remember that woman with the
Bruises.
purse?
Oh god.
Oh
yeah.
yeah.
She choked Ian.
Some bad actors here and
Yeah.
there,
Yeah.
some walkouts in the middle of shows.
Yeah,
You know,
walked
there's
right out.
Yeah.
show
Having
goes
to
on,
throw
live
up
Goes
theater.
on, you gotta do it.
Yeah.
It's always exciting.
It's theater,
Oh,
baby. It's
never a dull
live,
moment.
you know.
Never a
Never
dull
a dull
moment.
Never
Yeah.
dull.
That's for sure.
So those big, I think, like producer, like, oh my god, we're gonna get sued moments are like what really stick with me. And then also like, oh my god, like, yeah, we did opening night, a press night on entry. Like I was at the hospital till 3 a.m. and missed like the whole press party holding Grant's head while he got 19 stitches. You know, you're like,
Yeah.
okay, well,
This is it.
here it is, opening night,
This is what we
baby.
signed up for.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
And we're doing it again tomorrow. You know?
The show must go on.
Yeah.
I was sitting at the house once, and Justin called me. I had multiple missed calls, so I was like, oh, this can't be good. And I answered, and he's just like, we got broken into. And I'm like, what? Like, how is this even possible? This is literally like 1 o'clock in the afternoon on a Sunday, so it's like daytime. I'm like, what are you talking about? And he's like, the weird thing is, nothing seemed, and we had a whole bar, so we had stuff there. We weren't locked. Now we lock it up because that was our lesson. But nothing, everything was just moved. Nothing was stolen. And I immediately thought, check the camera, the photo booth, just in case. And sure enough, we're going through photos, and then there's a very tatted up person that you could tell was trying to lift it up, and it took a photo right of his face. And
Went
so-
online.
Went online.
Yeah, go straight
There
to the
it was.
website.
So, and he had accidentally left his cell phone. So we had a cell phone and a photo, and we never got broken into again.
So good.
Gotta love the
Yeah.
photo booth.
Yeah, that photo booth works in
And the
many
picture,
ways.
Magical
the picture was
photo booth.
gorgeous.
He looks
It's a
great.
gorgeous photo.
Yeah, he looks great.
Posted it.
Best,
#CreepLA.
best mugshot
Best
ever.
Oh man.
Yeah, every year somebody's peed in the show.
Mm-hmm.
Just, somebody peed all over the TVs. I had to mop that up for entry. Somebody peed in the
In the hallway at Lore.
the
Meeting
lobotomist's
into-
chair in Lore, peed in that chair.
You want to talk about funny stories? I just think about, it's so fresh in my mind, House of Creep. We, choreographed this big, epic, fight scene in slow-mo and strobe, right? So we're all, slow-mo killing each other. And the dance sequence lasts for, 30 seconds until, there's, our Clarissa Hawkins, dies or whatever. Well, it come to be, our light cue is off. And no joke, full house lights up. And we're no. Sure enough, we're all slow-mo fighting. All lights are up. And we're just I was just dying. I was this, you can't write this stuff. This is so funny.
I'm slashing Misha's face with my claws, and we were locking eye contact, and she's the ultimate professional, and so am I. But we were looking at each other, and I just know what Misha's thinking. I was like, don't laugh. Don't laugh. You better not laugh. You better not laugh. We're gonna do this. And afterwards, we died laughing. It's what are you gonna do? What are you gonna do?
Keep going. You gotta get
What are you
going.
gonna do?
Oh my goodness.
Love it.
Good times, good stories, man.
Can
That's
never
what it's
rely
all
on
about.
tech.
Yeah.
Yeah, true.
Wow.
Less tech, the better.
Less tech, the
Wow.
better.
Yep.
Although the tech is beautiful.
Yeah.
The tech was beautiful. But
You
your
can't rely on it.
performers always have to be better than the tech. That's
Yes.
for sure. Because
Yes.
tech screws up. It just
It does,
sometimes it goes
and
crazy.
it will.
And it will.
It just will.
Yeah.
You have to expect it to.
JFI 2020, baby, we're seeing clear. Here we go. We are coming out the gate. This has been the first year, right, with us sort of making this company happen in 2015. In the 1st of 2017, we started doing The Willows, which took us on a totally different trajectory. 2019 was the busiest year we've had as a company, outsourcing and working freelance and other big branded IP and content on shows. And 2020, we've again trying to always support dance, evolve, right? We've redefined the haunted house. We tried to redefine the murder mystery dinner experience. And now the one stab that we've always kind of had our hands in has always been this lounge component, this hospitality component that we always come back to. So we are how can we redefine nightlife? And so we are coming out the gate in a completely different lens, full of color and full of good music and unbelievable kind of characters. And we're creating an epic, iconic dance party that takes you right back to 1977 New York City. Very similar to the tone of a Studio 54, where people can come in and dress in the fashions of the 70s and get their boogie on the dance floor and connect with the characters that we've written for the show are just going to be memorable. And for us too, we've always wanted to reach new audiences, and we've also not ever wanted to outprice ourselves, right? We want this work to be accessible, and by able to come out with a show called Night Fever, which is more of a pop-up show. We're popping it up on Thursdays and Sundays for each month for two nights only. So it's kind of this flash mob idea, right? You get the ticket while you can, and then she disappears again until we come back the next time. So we're opening up a show Valentine's Day weekend for a little Valentine's Love Fest. And we're going to kick it off there for our first sort of quarter one. And then our brains have already been ticking. And I would say horror is in us, right? These two, we're not the biggest fans. They watch movies like this. But for Daniel and I think too, it just kind of comes so natural for us. And I think we will go where our fans want us to go, and I think we will go where our heart sits. Yeah.
I think it's a good example of this group and just the fact that there's no ego and everyone's humble and we play to everyone's strengths and everyone's ideas matter. And I think that each show we know that it leaned into a lane of somebody for sure, and we're so excited for Night Fever because we know that Steph is so talented in her dance and choreography, and she's been chomping at the bit for a show like this. So it's so cool that we can adapt and be nimble and do these things that we know are going to play to the strengths of somebody. And so this particular show, Steph is taking charge and she is owning it. It's going to be so awesome. And more, I think it'll allow our guests to know that we have multiple different angles that we can show you, and it's exciting. And yeah, horror is still always going to be there. I've learned to like be less scared, or at least try. But at the end of the day, we're never going to leave what got us here, and we're never going to leave the guests that trusted us to, go with them. So certainly never say never, but we also want to explore and get creative and change things and grab ideas that come from people's heads and say, hey, let's try it. Let's figure it out. And luckily we are, because I think it's going to be awesome. I really do.
Yeah, it's great to have a team that is down to do something so drastically different. And my dance background, like, this is like right up my alley. Like, this is like what I've trained to do, and was my career, was these main Broadway Vegas style shows. And I think it's like a great way to combine this immersive audience with kind of like my ideas of like what immersive can be, and like how it doesn't necessarily have to be like the strongest narrative with all the mystery, but it can be something impactful. And we've discovered that using the method of the lounge method is very effective, and it's effective because we have such strong actors that we trust in the moment, and we all can like see what this can be. And it's a great way for all of us to just kind of be like, you know what, we can do other things and we can do it well, and we can also show LA that you don't have to just be a theater fan or an immersive fan or horror fan, and you can still love these types of events. And that's important to me, being someone that's not like a fan of things that are scary.
I think just opening people's eyes to something that wouldn't even be on their radar, I think, is what we're trying to do with Night Fever.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like the people who are going to buy that ticket, obviously we have our core fans and we're super excited to bring them along for the journey, but I think it's also just like people who are just looking for a good night out, which in LA, I mean, who isn't, right? To come across something like this and come in, and we want to like blow their minds and take them on that journey too, And I think it's just really exciting that we have proven ourselves enough that we're being given this opportunity to do that and like to play.
Danny always says too, like Danny wrote in the press release, like, this work is to allow people to escape for a moment, and ultimately like that's what we're trying to do, create these stories and these worlds that you can escape for a night. And I think for us too, being able to have a fully permitted, fully built-in bar with so much production value in this venue is going to be insane for us out the gate. And also giving people to say, hey, come for 2 hours or stay for 5. And we've never been able to allow people just to like marinate and get comfortable in the world and see how a story can evolve over the courses of a few hours before like the next group gets pushed in. No, like, come for a night, get lost, party, play, participate, and ultimately engage.
And I think, I think like our fan base is still, our horror fans are still going to find that this subject matter, disco life in the 70s, is dark, gritty, sexy. Like, it's not all rainbows and butterflies. We are painting it in that kind of way, but there's drugs, sex, like all those things. There's a darkness in all of these people who enjoyed the disco, and we're kind of creating this circus of circus freaks, because that's what Studio 54 was. All these people could come together, party, and it didn't matter who you are. You could be whoever you wanted. You could be anything, and you were celebrated and you were welcomed. And that's what this company represents, and I think that's what we're trying to create an event that creates that in Los Angeles.
Especially in the times we live. Absolutely. Like, there's a lot of noise out there. Let's just have a night where there's no noise, and let's just all have fun.
Let's just dance.
Let's just dance. We just want to dance.
Please. That's all we want.
I think for me, learning from Creep, I guess this is more of a personal thing, and for I guess anyone, but you can. This is gonna sound so basic, but you can do whatever you put your mind to. You know, I never thought of myself as a writer at all, and I didn't really. And I wrote a bunch of sketch comedy, but I had never written anything like any of the shows that we've written, The Willows or any Creep show. It was just out of necessity, and it was something that we wanted to do. So for me, I've just learned over the years that if you really want to do something, you can. You just have to do it. You know, like you can do whatever you can do whatever you want. Even writing stuff, I thought there's no way we could do this in a show. The amount of strangers I've choked while wearing a gimp mask and like tape over my nipples this year. Like, look, would middle school me ever think I was gonna do that? Absolutely not. The fact that my parents know that I did that and I wrote that.
Kind of piggybacking on that a little bit, I think the thing I've learned the most is that like inspiration can kind of come from anywhere and does all of the time, and the magic that can happen when you put yourself in a space where you come in open and then everybody else is open to just collaborating and talking and creating. There's like nothing that you can't do, you know, and that's a very empowering thing to take away as a human, and it's like starts to kind of color the other areas of your life. But I think also just as creators, I feel like, not to put words on anybody's mouth, I feel like we all kind of feel that way right now. Like, we can do this. Like, there's not a challenge that's gonna come at us that we that we can't figure out how to do it. We can't crack that code, and that's like a really special and fun place to be. And I think Creep, the process of making it year over year and doing it differently every time has kind of unlocked that.
Well, mine's a little unique because it's, I think, both professional and personal. I think starting the company with, at the time, not even with my, partner, but hadn't even been engaged yet, and then kind of really forming a baby through engagement, through marriage, through all of it, really taught you patience and trust, and that, no dream is too big, like they mentioned. But also something that's always been really important to me, and I know Justin too, and this whole group, is that, I like to coach people and I like all this stuff, and I've always liked to look at people that may not be comfortable or may feel like they're the outcast, and I think that Creep has come together and allowed us to all know that we're all a little weird on the inside, so let's celebrate it. Mm-hmm. And I think watching audience members come in and write us letters or write us notes that just say, I was kind of an outcast, or I was this, but I found a family in you guys, or I found a home in you guys. It was just for me, it's such a beautiful learning of just how connected we are and just how alike we all are as humans. I know it's a little deep, but it's really taught me over the years just how important it is to celebrate everyone and celebrate their differences and celebrate those weird things, because why not? We just took weird ideas and made them into an entire company. Like, I think it's awesome, and it's been really special to watch. I think it's been special to put writers writing and dancers dancing and choreographers choreographing. And all these things, like just watching it all happen to me, I pinch myself every day, and knowing that it was a dream of his, and to play my small part to help it grow. It's just, you look at it from 30,000 feet and you're just like, wow, like honestly, you really can do anything if you just surround yourself with good people, trust people. And a big thing that I think that we do as an organization is we never ever worry about competition or talk bad about it. In fact, we support them, and we always talk well about them, and we send people to their shows. And at the end of the day, this is a small sandbox, and the more people we bring into it, it supports each other. So I think for anyone else doing a show like this, by all means, we will support you, and we will champion you, and we will do whatever we can to make you successful too, because ultimately that's what we all want. We just want people to have great experiences, and that's at the core of who we are as a foundation, is we'll always support other people. So just watching that, and that's a long answer of saying that, watching it all transpire and staying true to who we were from day one. We've never faltered, we've never gone a different direction, we've stayed true to our core values, and that's really important for me, and it just makes the whole process more beautiful.
Mine is personal, and it's similar to Daniel's in that this company has provided a way for me to stay involved in the entertainment industry when injuries have been major setbacks for me, and when you kind of feel like you're the jaded dancer going to auditions and getting to the end but not making it, or whatever it is. This gets the creative juices flowing, and I've discovered how important it is just personally in my life to keep a creative job going, and also to be surrounded by people that are encouraging and helping me to discover that choreography and dance does lie in horror. There is something beautiful there, and feeling the support from people to think that I can create something. And even with costuming, like I have no background in costuming,
You do know him.
She
now.
got an eye,
You're
though.
good.
and
You're
then one
good.
day,
now.
no, but then one day Kristen's like, "You are a costume designer," and I was like,
Yeah.
"I am."
Yeah.
And I'm like, "Yeah, I
you
am.
are.
I am." And it's like being surrounded by people that are like, "Oh yeah,
Oh,
no,
yeah.
you can do that, and you can do it well, and you know what? We're gonna
Yeah.
watch you do it, and we're gonna let you shine." And it's like been a very special thing for me to think that dance has brought me to this group, but there's so many other avenues of who I am that have been able to shine.
This whole thing is just so blissful, right? It's like belief is just so real, and I think trust. I've learned what trust is. I've learned with trust with people in our worlds, and I've learned trust with the amount of people that we employ or whatever. Everyone just has to show up, and so I'm just really grateful. I'm grateful over the last 5 years that our worlds have reached, over 25,000 people. And I think never in a world would I imagine that people would take the time and take their hard-earned money and spend it on art and spend it on a dream. And ultimately, I get to live a life full of passion and full of hours. But I would die for the work, and I'm so grateful, and I just pinch myself. And I think this first 5 years that's what they say is being a young business, right? First 5 years, you're just growing. So I'm really excited to see now that now I feel like finally found our feet, found our lanes, found our strengths, and I think only big things ahead for us. So, thank you.